Local authorities in Lima, Peru, reported an intense fire in a building near the San Martin Square. Browne was sworn in for a third term as the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, leading his Labour Party after winning the legislative elections of the Caribbean country. And over 1 million people marched in France to protest deeply unpopular pension reforms. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. Local authorities in Lima, Peru, reported an intense fire in a building near San Martin Square on Thursday. The blaze broke out in the midst of the so-called March for the Takeover of Lima and started on the roof of a building, although it has reportedly spread already to the second floor and the various balconies of the property. Firefighters arrived at the scene to attend to the emergency immediately. The general commander of the fire department, Luis Ponce Lajara, indicated that there are no people living in the place, but they are working to evacuate all the nearby neighbors. The fire department chief did not rule out the possibility that the fire could spread due to the large proportions that can be seen. However, he asked the protesters who are in the center of Lima to allow them to enter this street and thus avoid a tragedy. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. And that comes amid protests against the government of Dina Boluarte, who assumed the presidency after the dismissal of Pedro Castillo on December the 7th. The demonstrators, mostly from rural areas and indigenous communities, called for Boluarte's resignation, the anticipation of elections to 2023, and the closing of the Congress, among other demands. They also demand or ask justice for the repression victims registered in the last weeks in the context of the protests.
Brother, we're facing state terrorism. We're facing the terrorism of Dina Boluarte with allies of Fujimontesanism. We're sure that Fujimori is behind all this. The government is only supported by the army and the police because this state has been kidnapped by Fujimontesanism, and that is why they are sending us to kill. Brothers, to the international community, to all brothers of the world, SOS, help us, brother. They're killing us.
In Colombia, the humanitarian caravan with members of Gustavo Petro's government and of the National Liberation Army, the ELN, continues towards Chocó. The march is carried out by the communities of the departments of Cauca and Chocó with the aim of seeking solutions for citizens affected by the armed conflict. The journey will go from the location of Bajo Calima in Valle del Cauca to the Mio San Juan municipality in Chocó. The initiative corresponds to one of the agreed issues between the executive and the organization that seeks to register the human rights situation of various communities in order to resume the next round of talks as part of the country's peace process. On Thursday, Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Browne was sworn in for a third term after the ruling Labour Party secured the victory in the legislative elections of the Caribbean country. The ruling party obtained 1,295 votes against 621 for Alistair Thomas of the opposition United Progressive Party and Jamel Knight of the National Democratic Alliance. In first for Antigua and Barbuda's history, Browne, 55, is the first executive leader to win 3 consecutive general elections and consolidate his position in the next 5 years. General Attorney Steedroy O. Benjamin was also sworn in. The Labour Party won 2 of the 3 seats in the constituency, according to preliminary figures revealed by the Electoral Commission of Antigua and Barbuda. More than 60,000 citizens were called to vote for the renewal of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now we move on to other topics. Civil protection personnel in El Salvador remain deployed in response to the seismic activity registered in the last hours. Government authorities reported that at least 468 aftershocks have been registered in the western part of the country in the municipalities of Ahuacachapan and San Lorenzo, and that more than 500 homes have been affected. Civil protection staff have gone to all the affected areas to provide support and assistance to the victims, and shelters and safe houses have been set up to guarantee the safety of the evacuated and the displaced people. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Over 1 million people marched in France on Thursday to protest deeply unpopular pension reforms. The demonstrators opposed President Emmanuel Macron's plan to extend the retirement age from 62 to 64 years. Radical demonstrators reportedly hurled bottles, brins, and smoke grenades at police around the Bastille area in Paris. The law enforcement agents responded with tear gas and charged to disperse the rally. According to the police, some 30 people were arrested, mostly members of the radical group Black Blocs, who wore masks, helmets, and black clothes. The hard-left CGT union said that there had been over 2 million protesters across France, 400,000 in Paris alone.
It is out of the question that we continue to work much longer than initially planned, because our working conditions are absolutely deplorable. We are physically worn out. You have to know that in our company we have agents who retire at the age of 40 due to invalidity because their shoulders, backs, elbows, and wrists are broken due to occupational diseases. We work flexible hours, we work mornings, afternoons, nights, weekends, banks, holidays. So now, enough is enough, the sham, we're fed up. We're dealing today with a government which doesn't know what work is, so I invite them to come and work in a public hospital for a while. They'll see what the hardship is.
And the French President Emmanuel Macron met with the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez in Barcelona on Thursday. The high-profile meeting took place as a nationwide strike kicked off in France over a controversial pension reform which raises the retirement age from 62 to 64. Paris seeks Spanish support for its uncompromising stance in a brewing trade dispute with Washington. The pair met at the National Art Museum of Catalonia for head-to-head and were to later sign a friendship and cooperation treaty, reinforcing bilateral ties on issues such as migration, defense, and energy. With the treaty, Paris is seeking to cement stronger ties with neighbors, notably those in Southern Europe, at a moment when the Paris-Berlin alliance underpinning EU unity is showing signs of strain. On Wednesday in Davos, the Secretary General of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, Hiram Al-Ghais, assured that he has a lot of confidence in China's economy. In an exclusive interview on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum, the executive praised China's economy and the strength of its leadership, government, and the people. China showed a stable economic growth in the past year despite pressures, including the resurgence of COVID-19 and a complicated external environment. On Tuesday, China's National Bureau of Statistics reported the country's economy grew 3% year-on-year to a record of $18 trillion in 2022. Kuwait's Al-Ghais took over as Secretary General of the OPEC in August, succeeding the late Mohammed Barkindo, who died in July last year. On Thursday, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, announced her resignation from office as from February this year. In a speech, the New Zealand leader said she no longer has the energy to continue governing the country after 5.5 years in office. The Prime Minister's decision comes 9 months before the next parliamentary elections. Aged 42, Ardern was elected Prime Minister in 2017 and is now due to leave office on February the 7th. From that date, the New Zealand Labour Party will vote to elect a new leader. Throughout her term, the politician won 2 elections and became the youngest head of government in the world. In addition, others faced the challenge of leading New Zealand during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the Embassy of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in Damascus organized this Thursday an act of solidarity with the Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab, kidnapped by the government of the United States. This activity helped to ratify the support of the Syrians to their Venezuelan brothers in the struggle for the freedom of Saab. From Damascus, our correspondent Hisham Wanus with the details.
Alex Saab, Violation of International Law and U.S. Double Morals. That is the title of the conference given by Laila Tajuddin, Saab's lawyer at the Venezuelan embassy in Damascus. In a conversation, she explained the importance of raising awareness towards the Syrian people and the rest of the world regarding what is really happening with the case of this Venezuelan diplomat kidnapped by Washington.
Venezuela has also had a very clear attitude towards its diplomats because we are very clear that this is not only something that affects the Venezuelan people, but it now leaves all the diplomats of the world vulnerable. And that is why it is important to raise awareness, and that is why it is important that the world knows about this case, and that it obviously comes up to protest, as it should.
It is a double morale and a double standard of the United States, and is the clearest example of an empire that is losing its credibility, and as I said before, it's an empire that is crumbling. Thus, the importance of spreading what is happening with the case of Alex Saab, not only in Venezuela and in Syria, but in the whole world.
The participants in the activity, which included representatives of the Syrian government and people, as well as the different Palestinian factions residing in Syria, expressed their total solidarity with Venezuela, condemned what they described as criminal action by Washington, and called for the immediate release of Saab.
In this meeting, we ratify our total solidarity with Venezuela as a government and as a people, headed by President Maduro, in appreciation of Venezuela's firm position of defending the cause of freedom, justice, and law in the world, in particular, its support to the Palestinian people and their just cause. We condemn that the United States kidnapped him for being a patriotic citizen who defended his homeland and worked to mitigate the impact of the United States blockade on his people. We ratify our strong support for Alex's case and call for his immediate release in accordance with international treaties and in respect of international and humanitarian law.
The case of Alex Saab is the case of all patriotic people around the world who defend their country against U.S. oppression. It is a case that involves the solidarity of patriotic people, including the Syrian people. There is the need to put an end to the arrogance, hostility, and intransigence of Washington. That is the main message of this Syrian-Palestinian solidarity gesture with Alex and all the Venezuelan people.
Hisham Wanus, TeleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Senegal, transport unions united to denounce government measures to combat road insecurity in the country. The restrictive measures were taken by the government following an automobile accident in the department of Kafrin, which left 19 people dead. The measures include limiting the circulation of buses and trucks to 90 kilometers per hour. In this regard, the transporters rejected the lack of consultation, qualifying the measures as unilateral. According to the World Bank, Senegal is a country of 17 million people, with 24 road deaths per 100,000 inhabitants per year. In Iraq, at least 2 people were killed and dozens were injured on Thursday when a deadly stampede broke out outside a football stadium before the Gulf Cup final between the national team and Oman. The rare opportunity to see home international games had drawn thousands of fans, many without tickets, to the Basra International Stadium in southern Iraq in the hope of witnessing the final between the Iraqi national team and Oman. The stampede broke out outside the stadium as people started pushing to get in, according to the stadium security. As a result, there were at least 2 fatal casualties and over 80 injured. The country has long been banned from hosting international football matches and was counted on the Gulf Cup to improve its image. However, it has already been forced to apologize for organizational failures and logistical difficulties after the deadly incident. On Thursday, Israel released Palestinian Maher Yunis, who spent 4 decades of his life imprisoned by the Zionist government. Yunis was sentenced to prison by the Israeli regime when he was an enthusiastic young 25-year-old man determined to fight for the liberation of his homeland and the defense of the Palestinian rights. Now, at the age of 65, he finally left the Hedorim prison near Tel Aviv and traveled to his village, Ara, where he was welcomed and entertained by his relatives and neighbors. The Palestinian news agency Wafa broadcast a message from Maher where he greeted his release and was optimistic about meeting the new generations, chanting in the name of Palestine. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.